Welcome to episode 69 of Marathon Talk, powered by Abbott World Marathon Majors. On this week's show, we'll look back on the TCS London Marathon. Oh yes, it was the biggest marathon in history. A glorious day in the British capital, but it didn't make for an easy running experience.
We also have big news for next year's Abbott World Marathon Majors, Marathon Tours, and Travel Age Group World Championships as they head to Cape Town for 2026.
And our guest on this week's show is a real-life, proper, bona fide rock star who swapped guitars for trainers to take on the London heat. Rou Reynolds, lead singer of the UK band Enter Shikari, joins us for a chat.
And to wrap up the show, we hear from our listeners as they tell us about their London Marathon experience. All of this and more on this episode of Marathon Talk. Martin, you have had a really busy week in London. You are all over the place at the running show, in the media center. Are you recovered?
Yeah, it's Thursday. It's Thursday? Is it Friday? It's Friday today. Everybody's recovered by Friday, but it is a busy week. I was at the running show all week, meeting just loads of lovely runners. There's always lots of nervous first-timers at London, especially this year, you know, with wave starts and it being the biggest official marathon in history with, you know, well over 56,000 finishers. So a lot of people that came through the running show in the week before the marathon, but it's always full of excitement, loads of fun, and then topped for me on race day by hosting the media centre. So, you know, I get to meet loads and loads of the kind of mass participation runners pre-race, and then on the day, I get the privileged position of actually being in the media centre where the elites, the top elite in the wheelchairs, both wheelchairs, and in the men's and women's races come through. So, you know, I kind of get the best of everything.
Right.
Yeah, so what a week. And it was warm as well. The tent was cold, actually. The media tent was cold when we rolled in at sort of just after 7 o'clock in the morning. But gradually, as the day warmed up, the media tent got warmer and warmer and warmer. At one point, I thought it was like a hot air balloon. It was going to take off. How was Oklahoma for you?
Oh, it was great. It was the 25th anniversary of the Oklahoma Marathon, Oklahoma City Marathon, commemorating 30 years since the Oklahoma City bombing. And I was just so proud of the running community, how we can come together and unify and flex our resiliency. It's what we have to do in running all the time. And to see just 25,000 people coming together to light up the city was really a special event to be a part of. Really,
did you ever run, or were you just there on duties?
I did run. I'm going to name drop right now. I ran the 5K on Sunday morning with Joan Benoit Samuelson and Meb Keflezighi. So my running friends, we had a really good time, and really just a great event. I would recommend that for people to put on their bucket list.
Yeah, awesome. So here's a difficult but important question, Dina. In those situations, who gets asked for the most selfies?
Oh boy, I don't know. I mean, we usually just all jump in together, don't we? Just like, let's photobomb. You're asking Meb for a selfie. I'm going to photobomb it.
Yeah, all three of you. Mind you, that's quite some selfie, isn't it? That's quite some selfie. Some right proper rock stars of marathon running right there. And we do have later on in the show a brilliant interview with a genuine marathon rock star. But why don't we have a chat about London first? In the men's elite race, the race was won by Sebastian Soy, and he won it in quite an incredible fashion. As I said earlier, I was in that media tent, and one of the fascinating things about being in that media tent at the finish is that we've got this huge screen, Dina. You've probably been in them at other events. There's a big screen, and it's split into the lead cameras for every event. So you can see the chairs and you know, you can see the front of the field in the men's and the women's, and you've got different feeds and things. You've got the world feed commentary, the BBC commentary. You can hear Crammy. waxing on about what's going on in the race, and you know, it really puts you in the hub of marathon running. And in the men's, it was fantastic. Quite different, I think, to the women's. And one of the things that made it fantastic was that there was a big group of about 10 men for a long time. And then around about the 30k mark, Sebastian Soy put in this incredible kick. He ran, I think, about a 4:16 mile to break away from that pack for the 20th mile. And in doing so, he runs this 13:56 5k split from 30 to 35k. He actually went on to split 28:16 from 30 to 40k. I mean, that's impressive. And then he ran 34:40 from 30k to the finish. Now, that might not sound like anything until I say that from 30k to the finish, so his final 12k, he covered in 1:59.56 pace, right? So that's why he blew the field apart. And a really interesting observation about that was that he took advantage of not taking a drink at that point. So Jacob Kiplimo's in the race, of course, and you know, I was expecting massive things from him too. He ended up coming second in the race in his debut, running 2:03.37. But the crunch point in the race was the not taking of a drink at 30k, when, you know, so he put the hammer down and legged it for the final 10k.
That to me was the most shocking part, because in the span of my career, that was my most important fluid station. Those were like when you're starting to fatigue a little bit, so important. I had caffeine I had like 2 gels dissolved in water because I don't like the consistency of gels. So it was like high calorie content, heavy on the caffeine, like just give me that jolt to wake up for that final push. So for him to forego his fluids in a time where my mentality is like, get all you can in this station, so that you can have the energy to go to the finish. That was so impressive to me.
And not only that, it's kind of redefining. This is the second time, you know, this has happened in London. You know, like we're seeing these devastating fast finishes. So he runs a negative split, right? So I think from memory, he did something like 61:30, so around about bang on pace through halfway, then 60:57 for the second half, right? So he runs this massive negative split. Bear in mind that in the women's race, they ran a fairly heavy positive split of about 2.5 minutes. So the fields were run very differently, you know, and we had Hassan, more about the women's in a moment, but we had Asafat and Hassan in the women's race, but they run this big positive split, whereas in the men's race, we see this negative split with this extraordinary redefining of how to run the last 10k, almost in a kind of Kiptum-esque tribute, which I thought was, you know, a brilliant way to see London unfold. It was very different in the women's race, though.
Yeah, in the women's race, hats off to Tigist Assefa, earning the women's only world record in a time of 2:15.50. She didn't want to sprint. She definitely wanted to drag out that finish. Hassan was third. There was high expectations for her in the race, and I've seen a lot of comments asking for clarity about women's only events, because I think it was back in 2011 when Paula Radcliffe was going to run the Berlin Marathon with male pacers, and there was a differentiation, and the IAAF at the time, and now World Athletics, made the choice back then that male pacers could not pace women in a women's only event, which seems fair, right? It was a
which seems pretty logical, right?
It definitely seems like a fair call as we're having these differentiations on women's world record and women's only world record. So that's where that stands. And I feel like that makes a lot of sense. There were races that both Paula and I had run together that we had male pacemakers taking us the distance, and that should not count in a women's only event.
Yeah. And of course, London had that women's only world best, paced with women as well. And of course, that was obliterated.
I have a question, Martin. When you're in the media center, that command center with all the media, are the journalists behaving themselves? Are they just in front of their computers typing, or are they like shouting out comments? What's the vibe like in that room?
It varies, actually. They don't tend to shout out. So my role is to try and provide a little bit of insight into the race. So, for example, your comment about Assefa didn't want to have a sprint, right? So in the middle of the race, what do we see? We see this build up to the potential of Assefa having another face-off with Hassan, right? We saw that. We've seen that previously where Assefa has come second, right? So she's second at London. She's second in the Paris Olympic Games in 2024. Notorious sprint finish in Paris 2024 because there's a little bit of nip and tuck. There's a little bit of argy-bargy on the final turn. Who's going to get the line? Right? Who's going to get that line? And it was Hassan that got the line and went on to win the Paris Olympic Games. So I'm thinking to myself, Assefa's not going to want this. She's not going to want this. She's going to try and break. And of course, she saw a little wobble, I think, in Hassan when she started dropping off the pace. For a moment, I wondered if Hassan was going to finish because she didn't look like she was the same athlete of confidence. So that's the kind of thing that we're talking about in the media centre. So, I'm sort of saying that, and then I'm thinking, well, I'm hoping that this is about right for the journalists, to take some notes and write down. And then, we wait for the race to unfold and we watch the BBC and we listen to Steve and Paula doing the commentary of the race and the journalists are making their notes. And then I'm trying to give splits and breakdowns and mile by mile and talk through the event. And then what happens is the elites finish, they go for a presentation, which takes place in the fan zone at the London Marathon finish area. And then they come back into the mix zone where all the press kind of hop up from their desks and they beaver on back to the mix zone where the athletes come through. And then it's like a bit of a melee while all the press get out their little tiny tape recorders. You know what I mean? Like voice tape recorders, like microphones, and they record the post-race interviews with the top athletes and the interesting stories in the race. So yeah, it's not, I wouldn't say it's like it's definitely not an Ibiza phone party, Dina. But there's degrees of excitement every now and again. Yeah, it was all right. It was good. And it's good when interesting things happen, like in the female race and in the male race. We saw a great wheelchair event too. Marcel Hug made it 5 wins on the bounce in London. He came home really clear with a time of 1:25.25, which I liked because it was 2025. Catherine De Bruyne won the women's race. She battled it out for a while with Susanna Scaroni, in the end, came out on top with a time of 1:34.18, new course record, I think. Dina, I was on the finish line talking to the finishers. Some of them, so the media centre's right next to the finish line. So I popped out a few times to have a look at what's going on. Like I said at the beginning, the tent gets hotter and hotter and you need to go out for a bit of air. And now when I went out, I was like, oh, it is hot. And there's people streaming over the line. We're about 75 metres or so, 50, 75 metres or so past the actual finish line. So people are, walking, staggering through. It was hectic. We had an awful lot of medical resource at the finish. The St. John's ambulance and those medical resources were doing a fantastic job of watching everyone come through the finish line, paying real close attention to those finishers and their needs, and then supporting them, with what they needed to help them cool and help them try and relax and help them get through cramp and, help them rehydrate. And it was carnage in parts. So, when it gets hot, what guidance do you have for kind of managing those types of conditions?
Yeah, when I saw the temperatures that morning, I was like, oh no, this could get ugly for some people out there. And I think I think when you spend months training for something and you know the kind of splits that you should be hitting mile after mile, kilometer after kilometer, we get fixated on that. And instead of just being flexible and understanding that weather is a critical last part of information that putting our marathon puzzle together, putting our strategy together. And so when the weather is excessive, either cold or heat, it tells me first, before I get to the starting line, how to dress properly and maybe adjust my fueling on a hot day, maybe making sure I'm consuming more fluids, but also dial that pace back, right? That maybe we adjust what our focus is on that day. Maybe it's not going to be a personal best day. Some people did run personal best. My goodness, that was amazing to witness. But really being mindful of some of those precursors of heat conditions, like having chills or not sweating anymore, feeling like you're straining.
Oh, that horrible feeling when you get sort of, when you're really hot, but you get goosebumps.
Yeah. Like those are clear signs that you're exceeding your exertion level for those conditions. So really paying attention when the weather gets hot. And that goes for people that will be training through the summer months right now, right? When they're getting in their 20 milers for their fall marathons, being really mindful, maybe even having a flexible zone in your training, like a month-long period of being able to get in that 20 milers so that you can adjust it depending on the hotter and cooler days that summer has to give us.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll have a little bit more later in the show around London, but there's some big news elsewhere this week regarding next year's Cape Town Marathon.
That's right, Martin. In 2026, the Abbott World Marathon Majors Tours and Travel Age Group World Championships will be held in Cape Town Marathon. The key points that I'd like to let our listeners know is that this year the event will take place in New York City. But the success of the championships in Sydney last year was a key driver. If you remember, Sydney was a candidate city when they hosted the age group world championships and then became a major in November at the New York City Marathon. We had the privilege of being in the room in the media center when they announced it. So this is a potential as Cape Town tries to get their candidacy. Their final race will be this October. So maybe that sets them up to be potentially the first major for the age group championships. Over 3,000 athletes from around the world are expected to participate. So super exciting to be landing in Cape Town for the age group championships.
Yeah, next year's Cape Town Marathon is moving to May 23rd from its old date in October. So we'll hopefully have Statman Stu on for a forthcoming episode to talk about what that means from the age group world rankings point of view, but he's still recovering from London. So we'll leave him to be at the moment. Anyway, back to London and back to Rockstars. What a Rockstar race it was. And we're going to now have an interview with a genuine rock star. On this episode of Marathon Talk, I'm joined by Rou Reynolds. He's a British musician, songwriter, author, best known as the lead vocalist and multi-instrumentalist of Enter Shikari, a band that has consistently pushed musical boundaries. They blend post-hardcore, electronic, alternative rock. Reynolds has been the creative force behind the band, writing and producing much of their music while also playing guitar, keyboards, trumpet. Beyond that music, Rou is a passionate advocate for mental health awareness, climate action and social justice. He's just taken part in the 2025 London Marathon, his first London, I think, in support of the Mental Health Foundation, highlighting his commitment to both physical and mental resilience. Welcome to Marathon Talk, Rou.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Did I get the rest of it right?
Yeah, it was beautiful. It was, an all-encompassing, broad, introduction. Love it.
Yeah, good. Well, it's nice to meet you. It's good to have you here on Marathon Talk. Was I right that it was your first London Marathon?
It was indeed. Yeah, wow. Yeah. I mean, it was my first marathon, full stop. My partner and my brother have both done marathons, and they'd been sort of, poking me and annoying me for years, saying that I need to get it under the belt. So finally caved in.
I just read up a little bit about, some of your background, and I even listened to some songs.
Oh, brilliant.
And and I loved a couple of lines in a blog, right? All hill sprints and shin splints. Perfect. I mean, you'd only get that if you're getting ready for a marathon. There'll be listeners now going, "I get all hill sprints and shin splints," and then this line, you wrote, "There is an inner strength from extreme challenges. It's good to shock yourself with what you're capable of." Now, you wrote that before London. How do you feel about that with London in the bag?
Um, I mean, I believed that line very much beforehand, but now it's kind of taken on a whole new level. Like I knew it was going to be tough. I'd been I've spoken to many people who'd done marathons, but like it was another level. It was just, it's almost cliche to describe it in the fact that, every atom in your body is telling you to stop. You need to stop doing this. Your legs can't take it anymore. And it's a complete mind over matter. But that doesn't even encapsulate the brutality of the experience. It really is just like nothing I've ever experienced. And I've done a lot of half marathons, but
Yeah.
there's something about adding on that last 10-15K that just changes the whole experience.
I think you ran 5:09. Have I got that about right? So
Yeah.
yeah, pretty
Yeah.
impressive stuff, because it was hot. And in marathon
Yeah.
running, like, you're dead right. It's the last bit, which can really test you. How did you find the hot weather?
Well, I was a bit sort of complacent about it beforehand. I was like, what, 21 degrees, 22 degrees at the height? That's not that hot, that'll be fine. Like when I was training a few months before, I did a tour in Australia, and of course it's their summer. And so I did one of my long runs, I think like a 20K or something, in about 30 degrees, and that was something else. It was intense. So I was like, yeah, it'll be fine. But it really impacted the day.
Yeah.
But I think the difference that I had with this one is I actually really hydrated well. I don't think I've ever hydrated as well as I have on a run, a lengthy run. So that kind of helped. But yeah, it was it. When we were setting off at 10:30, I was already sweating before we even
Yeah,
started
before you
running.
got
So
going. And did you have
yeah,
those moments? You said, "Oh, it was quite difficult." If you look back at, we're recording on Thursday, so we're like 4 days after the run. Did you have those moments in the marathon that you said they were testing? Can you go
mm,
back and just think, actually, I've got this vivid, memory of this part of the race when this was going on, and this is how I felt.
yeah.
And then, how did you get through it? Like, what did you
Um,
do to get through it?
well, I mean, my aims were really just to finish. Like I'd had a few injuries and niggles that I was quite worried about, and I was like, if I can just run the thing, that would be great. So I didn't want to do any walking, and that was kind of my one aim. And I didn't care about time as long as I
Yeah.
ran the thing. We had one piss and stretch stop, but that was it.
For half
So
an
we
hour.
managed it. Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, the
No.
queues for the toilets were like, oh, thank God, there's a queue. We can actually
Yeah.
stop and stretch for a bit. But yeah, I mean, those. I would say like from the halfway point onwards, it was not enjoyable in the slightest. It was just like from one pain to another. I was very thankful that I'd had iliotibial band issues. For anyone that doesn't know, it's the band that goes all the way from your hip down to your ankle on the
Yeah.
outer side of your leg, and that was really difficult. That actually first came on in Australia, and that didn't play up too much because that would have finished me, and that would have meant I would have had to have walked. So I was very thankful for that, but just about everything else hurt. Like
Yeah. What goes through your mind? So, like, some people will have like things they do, like they might count. I can remember meeting some runners that are like, yeah, I count, and they count up and up and up. So I thought, well, I'll try counting. And I can only get to 4. Like, I'd go like in a rhythm, 1, 2, 3, 4. One,
Yeah,
two,
yeah,
3, 4. And other people think of reasons for running, and other people are like listening to music or singing songs in their head. When you
yeah.
got to those particularly tough moments, what happened? What were you telling yourself inside your head?
Well, it's strange because the experiences the experience at the London Marathon, and I suppose any major marathon, is going to be different from any other long run you do, because there's just constant noise and
Yeah.
atmosphere. Like, it didn't let up for the whole way. I was told there were like quiet bits, down the Isle of Dogs and coming through, getting through Greenwich and stuff like that. But it was just people, just and noise. So like, even putting the pain aside, like, it was quite hard to do any kind of more meditative
Hmm.
style of thinking to get you through it, because it was just constant distraction. So I imagine in some ways that made it easier, in some ways that made it harder. I think because it was sensory overload as well, so
Yeah.
you're using up a lot of energy just taking in what's happening,
Yeah.
from brass bands to people screaming to just everything, to drums, and the sights that you're taking in. The whole thing's very surreal.
Yeah.
um but yeah, I found the only thing for me was just breathing, just concentrating on my breathing. Just, if I could, it was just mostly in for 4 through the nose, out for 4 through
Uh-huh.
through the mouth, just quick counts of 4. And I would say that started off as like a definitive, disciplined thing to do, that I knew would just keep me focused. But it finished as like an absolute necessity. I was
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
breathing to keep myself going, really, and concentrating on very focused breath work.
And I think that's one of the beauties of marathon running, particularly when people haven't done it, is they suddenly see this application of that kind of skill, right, or that activity when they're under extreme duress in a marathon. You're under physical stress, emotional stress. Like, you're right with the sensory overload stuff. It's all happening and it's all kicking off at the right time, at the same time, and you're trying to push your body beyond where it's ever been before, right?
Mm.
And so there's a lot of learnings in that around. Okay, so that worked in this context. Now, how do I do that in other areas of my life that may or may not be quite as complex, or as challenging, but the skill of transitioning what you did in London and putting it into other areas of your life, or vice versa. Like, I'd be pretty worried if I had to get up on stage and perform to thousands of music fans. Yet it's something that's second nature for you. So, you've got skills that you may have practiced in one line of your work that maybe you brought to marathon running. And then in marathon running, maybe you're going to take some of that back into being a musician. I don't know.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think just the stamina. We played a lot of long sets, especially summer festivals, where it can, we've been on stage. I remember one time we played Reading and Leeds Festival main stage, and it was a few years ago, where it was a heat wave. It was like 33 degrees. We were on at 2 p.m. and it was an era where we were wearing full suits, and we had pyro on stage, so there were flames about a meter in front of our faces. So it was ridiculously hot.
Yeah.
Um, so there's experiences like that I suppose are quite strange, and not your average experience, that I can sometimes take of as learning experiences. But yeah, I just, nothing really could have fully prepared me for that second half of the London Marathon. It was just, it's something now that I can take away and feel a lot of fortitude, and feel strong about, now I've experienced it. But yeah, at the time it was just, yeah, something completely novel.
Yeah, nobody's going to come up at 23 miles and set off some pyrotechnics, put a mic in your hand, and
Thankfully,
tell you to do some crazy dancing, although it
I
probably could be arranged.
I wouldn't be able to sing. It would just be whimpers. But yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the kind of demands of the music career and touring. You've mentioned that. Is running something that you might do in the build up, or now obviously now you've done London, and you've trained for London, but will you keep running and use that in some way to support the demands of touring?
Yeah, definitely. I think I need to. What I found out, one thing I found out just through having so many niggles and injuries over the last sort of year, really, is that I need to work on my strength. I've kind of just let I d- just haven't held it in the true like importance that it should be held in. Especially, I'm like approaching 40, so that's something that I need to think about for my longevity as well,
Hmm.
and being able to move into my old age and stuff. So, yeah, I think that's going to be my focus. But I think really, I've never been like a gym guy or like massively focused on like building muscle or anything. But so it's probably going to be more of a necessity in order for me to be able to keep running and in the long term in my life. So I think I'll always run as long as I can. But I'm not sure how many times I'll do marathons. I'm just over the never again stage. I'm like, maybe, yeah. But
Just over the never again stage. Sounds like a relationship, doesn't it?
yeah.
You just split up. I'm just over the never again phase.
Yeah,
Maybe I'll think about it one day. There's probably a song in that somewhere for you.
yeah, absolutely.
Putting these experiences together. Now you were raising money for charity, for mental health charity, the Mental Health Foundation. Just tell us a little bit about why that organisation. Why is that important to you?
Yeah, we've worked with them for a little while. We've done a few little things here and there, and events and stuff, and they've always been brilliant people, and you can tell that they're like an excellent charity, and they're all very passionate. Um, and I think, I've had like personal experience of mental health difficulties. Everyone I know really has had some like difficulty, and I think in this country, especially with how the NHS has been treated over the last decade, if not more, being run into the ground. The mental health services are as brilliant as the people are that work in it. They're not supported, and they're nowhere near what they need to be to support our population. So these charities, come in and fill those quite often horrifying gaps. So it is a brilliant charity to support. We managed to raise just over 11 grand, which was
Wow.
which was awesome. So yeah, super happy.
Yeah, and sometimes when you've had your own personal experiences of those challenges, and I've read some of that stuff around your experiences of like panic attacks,
Mm.
and how that manifests in life. And of course, you see someone who's in public eye and somebody who performs for a living, right? And you think, well, surely that really, but and of course that's all part of wrapped into that performance element of what you do. So having that connection, being able to run as performance, but also being able to perform, yet recognize that there's benefits of physical activity and running and moving for you, and then connect it to the charity. There's actually quite a drive in the NHS at the moment to try and use physical activity in better ways to connect with people who struggle, particularly early on, to try and reduce the probability of the increase in longer term challenges. So clearly, you're an advocate for physical activity being put in those systems.
Yeah, it's been so helpful to me. And it's finding what works for you. Running a marathon isn't going to be everyone's choice. But like, yeah, I think running in general is incredible, and it's a great way to kind of fight back against this, modernity of just our indoor sedentary
Sure.
lifestyle, which is so far removed from what our bodies are built for. It's in our
Yeah.
bones, it's in our DNA to be outdoors, to be active,
Yeah.
all day, every day, really. So running is one sort of great way to combat that, I think.
And did you say you're about to go on tour? Have you got a tour this year, or
Um,
you just did one?
yeah,
What's the year looking like?
we've got summer festivals, so the kind of European festival circuit. And yeah, we're doing Reading and Leeds this year. And then we've got a couple of tours towards the end of the year. Yeah.
So what would your go-to run be? So you've just done an absolute banging set, right, at an outdoor festival, and it's rocking, and your brain's, just falling out of your ears, right? And you step off stage, and like, how does running fit into that environment? Like, what would your
Mm.
ideal run look like at that point in a
Um,
tour or a summer festival?
yeah. Well, I would say I would normally use it before the set, which I imagine people might think was weird because why would you want to tire yourself out? But it energizes me, I think,
Wow.
because often, when you're on tour, it's that indoor sedentary lifestyle. You're often in tour buses, on planes, hotels,
Yeah.
being carted from one place to the other, and you start to feel a bit like a touring menagerie, like a caged animal.
Yeah.
So being let out, I would say if we're about to play like a festival or a show, just like I love getting out into nature as well. So any kind of green space, whether if we're in a city, it's the nearest park. If we're in a festival, then we might be on the edge of a forest or something.
You
So
can.
just
Yeah.
getting out there, yeah, and that's even just like a 5K before a set. I'll go on stage feeling more confident, more agile, just more up for it, more energized, more motivated. It can be like such a wonderful elixir when you get out of your your bunk in your tour bus and you haven't slept great and you got sleep deprivation. You're all sort of sore and yeah, kind of awkward.
Stop it.
And
You're
it's
supposed to be painting this glorious life of a mega rock star. You're like, I'm folding myself out of a hotbed, like
yeah, it's
trying to
not
go.
glamorous, I'm
No,
afraid.
yeah, trying to go for a run. And I was, for me, often, if there's those busy things going on, I'm the opposite in that running gives me that solitude that I need, an
Mm,
escapism place. And so often
yeah,
it is in nature. So, and that's one of the beauties, one of the things I love about running is no matter where you are, like you can usually find somewhere where you can escape in a pair of running shoes in a
yeah.
relatively short amount of time. So, when you tour, have you got somewhere like where you've gone, do you know what? I snuck out for a run then and I absolutely loved it. Where would that have
Yeah,
been?
oh God. There's been so many. I mean, the first that comes to mind again is when we were just in Australia a few months back, and those tours can often be rather intense, and yeah, I love running because I can use it in both ways. I can use it as an escape and as a solitary experience to sort of clear my head, to get a bit of focus, to get a bit of alone time. That's brilliant. But also, it's an amazing social thing as well. And so I actually did a run with um, my bassist and my guitarist, and it's funny because you could be hanging out with someone a lot, but on a run, and it's the same with hiking as well. Running, I suppose, it has to be a more slow, leisurely pace. But when you're conversing with someone on a run, you can, I don't know, you get into like deeper topics, you get better connections with
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
someone. I think it's that kind of inbuilt pack vibe. We're doing something together, um, and I've just got to know people a lot more. And
Yeah.
a lot of my best friends, we go on runs together, and it's just, yeah, it's a wonderful experience, whether
Do
it's
they
being
go,
used.
oh, Raoul, not again, dragging me out? Like,
Yeah.
please.
It's often the other way around, actually. I can be very lazy.
Yeah, and there's actually a lot of research out that says when you go running with people, it is better for social connection, and
Mm,
it does promote deeper conversation. So, that anecdotal sort of evidence from you, there's real life evidence that says, just being side by side with somebody in a moving environment helps you connect better with them and helps you have deeper conversations because you're not sat on two like plastic chairs eyeballing each other across a room.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
um,
absolutely. That kind of shared experience, you're working for something together. It's also a bit like, I've not long had a new dog, and training her at the moment with other dogs and meeting other dogs, they say that you're supposed to meet and be walking in the same direction and just take them both, the two dogs who are just meeting each other in the same direction, instead of nose to nose in a
Yeah, yeah.
park meeting for the first time. Give them a shared sense of we're in a pack, we're going somewhere together, and it makes exact sense. The same
You
with
haven't
humans.
started smelling people, have you?
No, I haven't got quite that far. Cocking my leg on every tree. Yeah.
Right. Now, you did say that you were past the never again stage, but of course, London is just one of Abbott's World Marathon Majors. There's 7 actually World Marathon Majors across the globe, but you get a 6-star medal if you do 6. What about Tokyo, Boston, Berlin, Chicago, New York?
Oh, I mean,
Sydney?
I'd very happily do any of them. I mean, I think one of my favorite runs actually was jet lagged in Tokyo and running round I think I did like a 12K around Harajuku at about 3 a.m. and I never felt so connected to a city. Like, talking about having it encourage connection between people, it also makes you feel connected to a place as well, which is a really wonderful experience, whether it's a more natural world type of place or a built up cityscape. It's very connecting.
So we've shifted you in like 23 minutes from never again to, I'll do a marathon in Tokyo. Yeah, bring it on. I'll go to Chicago, Boston, New York. I did New York in November.
Amazing.
And I ran it with my co-host Dina Castor, and Dina used to be rapid, like proper rapid, like I'm probably going to get it wrong now. She'd run about 2:19. So
bloody hell.
I know.
Unfathomable.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what I felt when I had to start with her. So I was like, Dina, we're just going to enjoy ourselves. We did run similar to your time, actually. And I said, you're slowing down and we're going to really enjoy the marathon experience. And New York was epic, different to London, like a very different musical vibe as well, because you were probably tuned into London in terms of the music on course and the bands and things like that and, hearing things. New York, like, honestly, running through Brooklyn, having like 90s hip hop blasting at me was amazing.
Oh,
Absolutely amazing. I was kind of like, I know I can't windmill, but if I could, I would. Right, listen, it's great to chat to you. I'm glad that running resonates with you in some way, and you're taking some benefits from it, and also that you enjoyed and survived London. Rou, thanks for joining us on Marathon Talk.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Now, we have a slight confession to make. There was a minor editing issue on our last show, and a number of submissions for the London finish line forecast, which we did, ended up remaining on the cutting room floor. If you're not sure what that means, go back to media print room publications. We forgot. However, in the spirit of competition, we've reviewed all the submissions and we have found a winner.
Congratulations to Susan Turnbull, who predicted a finishing time of 4 hours, 48 minutes and 21 seconds and crossed the finish line with a time of 4:47:33, 48 seconds faster than she thought she'd hit. What a great effort from Susan. She wasn't the only listener who took on London last weekend. Shout outs also to Adam Hickey, finishing 11th with a time of 2:20. He says, I experienced the incredible crowds for the first time, and despite cramping in the second half, loved every minute of it. Oh my gosh, cramping and running a 2:20? It's pretty impressive.
Oh yeah, cramping and still running 2:20, quite incredible.
Another listener, Alyssa Panozzi, says she struggled in the heat, but still made it around in just under 5 hours. Good job.
And Rowan Kalikaran didn't have a great day. Ro is a long-time listener of the show, but he says, I managed to forget my trusty bag of raisins and banana chips at home on race morning, meaning I ate nothing from 6:30 a.m. to starting at 9:36, 3 hours without anything. Therefore, I wilted in the heat However, still the most amazing day, says Rou, and I can live with my 3:22:09, although I'm disappointed. Dina, did you have an immediate sort of pre-race snack like Rou? Was it like, did you have something that you'd always take to the race start line? And then have you ever forgotten it? And what did you do?
Right. I didn't. I tend to just eat 3 hours before my race, a good meal, and then just sip on carbohydrate drink until the race started. Did you ever have a pre-race snack that you needed to have?
No, do you know what? I used to go a bit old school because I found that sort of porridge and that for breakfast used to like upset me a little bit. So I would just have Marmite on toast, honestly. Like cheap white bread. Yeah, no, cheap white bread, Marmite on toast, bit of butter, a couple of hours before the race. And then that'd probably be it. I wouldn't eat again more than close than a couple of hours.
I'll tell you what I wouldn't eat. Marmite on cheap white bread, raisins, or banana chips. So I could give you a long list of things I would not eat. I would not eat.
Oh dear. And speaking of bananas, following your admission about your hatred of bananas, did get an email from Jess Collett. She wrote, I had to email to let Dina know she's not the only runner who hates bananas. Come on. I think they're disgusting. The taste, the smell, the weird way people eat them, just awful. Oh God. When I ran my first marathon back in 2010, I tried to learn to like them because I felt like I should, but it was an absolute no-go, said Jess. I'm happy getting my energy and nutrients from other sources. I'm halfway through my 6-star journey. Maybe I'll get to meet you somewhere along the line and you can not share a banana, Jess and Dina.
Oh, solidarity to my banana-hating sister, Jess. Good luck in your 6-star journey. How
and
funny.
Finally, we've got to give a mention to Adele. Adele Roberts, our guest on the show back in March. Really loved talking to Adele. She completed a 6-star journey. She completed her medal. And a few days later, I spotted she had an audience with none other than His Majesty, King Charles. She was on TV with her medal, looking ever so proud. I'm actually almost certain she was giving the King tips on how best to spectate on the final turn in London from his bedroom window. Anyway, well done to Adele and everybody else who crossed the finish line in London recently.
That's it for another episode of Marathon Talk. If this was your first time listening, don't forget to subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or your favorite podcast platform. Follow us on our social channels for more. Search Marathon Talk on your platform of choice.
Right, that's a wrap, I think, for another week. Thanks for listening. I'm off for a bit of a cycling trip next week. Are you up to anything, Dina?
Oh, yeah. I'm actually chaperoning an 8th grade trip to the Museum of Tolerance in Los Angeles. So that's really exciting to take the kids there.
Hang on a second. It's called the Museum of Tolerance.
Yeah.
I
feel like they should go every year.
Give me 45 seconds and tell me about the Museum of Tolerance, because that's something I haven't heard about.
The Museum of Tolerance is not like a Holocaust inspired museum, but it's just supposed to really ingrain in us that that hatred has no place in society, and let's not relive that. Let's be kind to each other and realize that everybody from all walks of life matter and contribute to society. I cannot wait to go. It's been on my bucket list, but it's an honor to be able to bring these young kids to a place to, and hopefully have some deep conversation afterwards poolside.
How many kids did you say you're taking?
We're taking about 80 kids.
Oh, I think 80? I think it's going to be a lesson in tolerance, Dina.
Yeah.
And a museum of tolerance. 80 kids, the Museum of Tolerance. Wow, that's a day in itself, isn't it? Come on. Right. Anyway, that's it. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Marathon Talk. Enjoy the run, wherever it takes you.